How does pawn structure relate to space sacrifices in chess? Have you ever wondered how the arrangement of pawns can impact your strategy in chess? Let's break down the connection between pawn structure and space sacrifices. Pawn structure refers to how pawns are positioned on the chessboard. Since pawns move forward but capture diagonally, their placement creates patterns that influence the game. These patterns can either limit or expand the movement of your pieces and your opponent's pieces. A space sacrifice is when you give up control over certain squares or even a pawn to gain long-term advantages. This can include better piece activity, open lines, or creating weaknesses in your opponent's position. The way your pawns are arranged plays a big role in this. A strong pawn structure means your pawns are well supported and advanced, giving you more space and restricting your opponent's options. On the flip side, a weak pawn structure, like having isolated, doubled, or backward pawns, can leave you with less space and more vulnerabilities to defend. In the context of positional sacrifices, especially those aimed at gaining space, pawn structure is key. For instance, sacrificing a pawn can sometimes open lines for your pieces or create a passed pawn. A passed pawn is one that has no opposing pawns blocking its path to promotion. This can force your opponent to divert resources to stop it, giving you more space and activity elsewhere. Gambits are a practical example of this concept. In a gambit, a player gives up a pawn early on to gain rapid development and control over important squares. The resulting pawn structure often determines whether the sacrifice was worth it. In the middle game, sacrificing a pawn to break open the center or create a strong outpost for your pieces can shift the balance of space in your favor. As we move into the endgame, pawn structure becomes even more important. Sacrificing a pawn to create a passed pawn or activate your king can be decisive. The relationship between pawn structure and space sacrifices is that the structure both enables and limits the effectiveness of such sacrifices. A well-timed sacrifice can exploit weaknesses in your opponent's pawn structure or create new weaknesses. However, a poorly considered sacrifice can leave you with a worse structure and less space. To sum it up, pawn structure sets the stage for space sacrifices by defining which squares are controlled and which are vulnerable. Sacrifices aimed at gaining space must be evaluated based on how they affect the pawn structure. Understanding this connection helps players make better decisions about when and how to sacrifice material for space and positional advantages.